Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, How Counties and Towns Can Use ARPA Funds to Support Stronger Families. We are excited to have you all here today, and we know some of our existing partners and friends are joining us, and we are so grateful to have you here. We also welcome those of you who are new to the Advocates for Children of New Jersey's webinars. My name is Dani Glover, and I am a Policy and Outreach Associate at ACNJ. If you don't know about us, Advocates for Children of New Jersey, or ACNJ, works with local, state, and federal leaders to identify and implement changes that will benefit New Jersey's children through research and producing reports, as well as by advocating and building coalitions. To learn more about ACNJ, you can visit our website at acnj.org or find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We are so excited to get started because counties and cities are in unique positions to support the families that live there to recover from the pandemic with American Rescue Plan funding. Counties and towns can do this by collaborating with key stakeholders, building strategic partnerships, and making deliberate and key investments supporting services families need, like childcare, mental health supports, and connecting residents to public benefits, and also supporting their communities' nonprofits that serve children and their families. Before we get started, we would like to have you answer 2 poll questions. So the first poll question, great, thank you. So the first poll question is, I am participating in today's webinar as a county government official, a municipal and/or town government official, an elected county or municipal official, a child care program or provider, an early childhood community organization like a nonprofit organization that supports families with young children, or you can choose other. So if you could just take a moment and choose one, that would be great. See if oh, good, great. So we have a little bit of everyone attending today. We have county government officials, thank you, and many municipal as well officials. Our child care programs and our early childhood community is represented. Okay, great. So now we're going to do the second poll question. And that is, I am attending today's webinar because I am already working to increase or build services for children and their families. So if you're already doing, as we mentioned, collaborating with key stakeholders, you would choose that option, or that you would like to learn more about increasing or building services for children and families, or you, as always, you can choose other. So we're going to just take a moment and do that poll. Do we have any results? Okay, great. So it looks like many of you are already doing this work in your community, and that's so fantastic. And there's also a good portion that are here to learn for the first time about how they can do that. So we're going to close that. So today you will hear from experts from national organizations, as well as leaders from communities and counties throughout the country who have already identified strategies utilizing the ARPA funds that they receive to support their own communities. We are so appreciative to them for taking the time out of their busy schedules, because they're all in the field doing this work, to bring their innovative work to New Jersey. However, right now I'm going to turn it over to our very own Cynthia Rice, ACNJ's senior policy analyst, who will provide an overview of the American Rescue Plan and our state's child care system. Cindy?
Thanks, Dani. And hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here talking about this important matter. I'm going to ask my colleague, Catherine, to pull up the slides. Great. Thank you. Wonderful. So this is a little bit of a just a preview and an overview of what we're talking about and the state of childcare right now. So this is the 411 on childcare. Okay, Catherine, it's not moving, so you might want to move it. Okay, so many of you know this, but we just want to give a little review. So there are basically 2 ways that childcare is funded. The first way is a private pay tuition by parents. So many of us have experienced this, where you pay once a month at the beginning of the month or sometime during the month, and you pay for your child to go for that month, regardless of whether they're there or not. It's a stated fee every month, and that's how many parents pay. The other way is through a child care subsidy. And the way in which that happens is that a family has to be eligible and have to be working or going to school. And so through federal dollars or through the state dollars, the cost of childcare is decreased because it's supported through government dollars to help low-income families who are working. Okay, let's see if it works. Still not working, thank you, Catherine. So how does a family become eligible for a child care subsidy? Well, the initial eligibility is that the family has to be at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. And for a family of 4 to be eligible, that's about $53,000 a year. So any family who's working and makes $53,000 or below and is 2 children or 3 children and 1 parent would be eligible to help defray the cost of childcare. Next. So we want to look at infants just to give you an idea of what that means. So right now, for an infant, this child care subsidy is a little over $1,000 a month, a little under $250 a week, and a little under $50 a day. So for an 8-hour day for each child, it's about $6 an hour. Remember, right now, our minimum wage is $12 an hour. So you can see that the system itself, while there have been significant increases, particularly for infants in the subsidy rate, it still is, still does not address all of the issues to get towards quality care because it's just not a lot of money. And so I want to take a step back and say that there's consequences for both funding. So clearly here we're saying, well, yeah, there's been increases, but does it really meet the true cost of care, of quality care? And the other thing is I want to mention something about parents. Well, there's often a misconception that if a family isn't eligible for a subsidy, they're rich. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We have many families who are not eligible, but are really struggling to pay for childcare. And as a consequence, what happens is that providers are hesitant to raise their prices to address all of their real costs because families just can't afford it, whether they're eligible for a subsidy or not. And they're fearful to price themselves out of the market. So you have this consequence in both of the funding streams that is a problem. Next slide. So let's talk just for a few minutes about supply versus demand. As of December 31st of last year, there are a little over 3,000 licensed child care centers in our state and about a little under 1,500 registered family homes. Next. And about almost 41,000 children of all ages, and that's from birth to age 13, because we do have school age. So it's almost 41,000 children participate in the subsidy system at one age level or another. And there's about a little over 9,000 of those are infants and toddlers. Next. AC&J completed a report in 2017 to get just some kind of a flavor. So what is the availability? So at the time, there was more than 207,000 children living under the age of 3 whose parents were working. So, and as a consequence, as the parents are working, you knew that these children, young children, needed some form of childcare. But our licensed centers at the time only had a capacity of a little less than 56,000. So you're talking about, so where are those 150,000 other children? And I'm not trying to give the impression that they're in bad places or dangerous places. We just don't know. What we do know is that when you have such limited access to center-based, it takes one option out of the picture for families. And so many families, as a consequence, have some kind of cobbled care in that, 2 days with grandma, 1 day someplace else. And so you don't have continuity. Often is the case, you don't have continuity for the children. Next slide. So all of this was going on before COVID. Where are we now? Well, as we said, this was a crisis before the crisis, where you just didn't have enough access, costs were too high for families, and that the subsidy rate was too low to meet the needs of providing quality care. Our programs, if you remember, early in the pandemic were closed for about 3.5 months, except for those who cared for and educated the children of essential service workers. And then when programs reopened last spring, enrollments were low. Parents have either lost their job or they were hesitant to put their children back in childcare when we were really still in the midst of COVID. The good news is that there has been stable dollars, stable funding through various federal rescue plans, the CARES Act, CARISA, and now the American Rescue Plan. Next. So where are we right now? Well, we know that the cost of doing business for childcare has skyrocketed. Recently, I was on a call and heard a childcare director say, just to give an example of just how they've skyrocketed. She said prior to the pandemic, a case of gloves were, which are a constant in childcare homes, childcare centers and homes, was $45 a case. They're now $90 a case. So when you're talking about this huge difference, these are additional costs. That's just one example. That's not cleaning supplies. These are just the gloves. And we are in the middle of a staffing crisis. The federal dollars that have been made available and will continue to be made available have helped, but it's still not enough to compete with some of the likes of Amazon and Target. Think about it, offering $18 an hour, some with health benefits. Many childcare programs cannot afford healthcare benefits. And even there are some of these larger companies that are offering tuition assistance or free tuition for higher education. So when you're thinking about that's the pool of potential staff is the same, and they're more likely to go to where they're being paid more. And then we're going to have another minimum wage increase in January up to $13 an hour. Some good news, well, there was a child care enrollment bill that the governor recently conditionally vetoed, but there will be an extension of subsidy of payments being made at a more regular basis. There'll be not regular basis, that will be more consistent. Often in the past, the subsidy rates varied from month to month. They'll be more consistent. And then, as we said, the American Rescue Plan, which was passed in March, states received the funding in April, and now we're talking about how the state is going to use those dollars. Next. So, as I said, the American Rescue Plan includes 2 pots of money. One is for to increase the amount of subsidy. So there's about $267 million for New Jersey. So that's there's some flexibility as to how states, including New Jersey, can use the subsidy dollars. And then there's about $430 million of what's called the Child Care Stabilization Funds. And what that means is that programs, both center-based and family child care, can apply for a grant to address some of their issues that were brought on by the pandemic, so to stabilize the industry, but also to begin to lay a foundation of strengthening the overall system. Next. So here are some of the things that our state plans to do with the funding. It really falls into 3 buckets: supporting families, supporting programs, and supporting staff. So this is all positive. Everything from bonuses for staff to grants for programs to waiving parent copay. So you can see that there's the state is trying to look at the totality of how to strengthen and support this system. Next. The question is it enough? And we submit that while this is a lot of money that the American Rescue Plan is providing, because up until recently, the system has pretty much been starved the question is it enough to turn around and to build a stronger system? And we're not sure. So for example, there's $1,000 recruitment and retention bonuses. That's terrific. And it's really needed. However, is that enough to entice someone to come to work for childcare as opposed to going to a place where they might get more money per hour and health benefits? I mean, the proof, it may retain people to stay, but the jury is out on whether it's enough to bring people in. And center-based grants, this is, remember, through the Stabilization Act. So they vary from $20,000 to $80,000. And certainly programs can use these funds, for example, for compensation, to get people to raise wages. The question is, let's say you have a program has 100 children, you'd be eligible for a fairly large, closer to the 80,000 range. But is that enough? With everything else going on, how much of an increase can you make? So the jury is still out, but here are some of the things that give us an idea that it might not, that the ARPA dollars alone are enough. And then there's incentives to provide childcare for non-traditional hours. So not everybody works 9 to 5. How is childcare supported in those hours that are beyond 9 to 5? We're not sure what that will look like, but we know that it's going to be a pretty big incentive needed. So when we're thinking about the totality of the system, are these dollars enough? We're not sure yet, but we think that there will definitely need some help. I think that's it for me.
Well, great. I think I'm up next. So go ahead and get us going here. My name is Rachel Mackey, and I am the Associate Legislative Director for Human Services and Education here at the National Association of Counties. Can you guys let me know if my screen share is working in the chat?
Yes, Rachel, we can see you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Just a little bit about NACO. So the National Association of Counties is the only national organization that strengthens America's counties and serves the county elected officials and 3.6 million county employees across the nation, including New Jersey, of course. We engage in federal policy advocacy, as well as providing a lot of leadership and research and other training and resources to county officials. We also have a 501c3 research foundation, the NACO Research Foundation, that is really focused on ascertaining, developing, and distributing knowledge about county governments and training of public officials and prospective public officials and other interested parties. I'm on our government affairs team, and I handle issues related to early childhood and childcare. And I work closely with my colleagues who are in our Children, Youth, and Families portfolio in the Research Foundation, who have also been working closely on issues related to implementation of ARPA funds for childcare. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So before I get into that, just a brief background on why counties matter for infants and toddlers. You all probably know this, but county governments are actually on the front line of the social safety net, and we invest $63 billion in federal, state, and local funding and human services every year. In many states, including New Jersey, we will administer key federal safety net programs. It varies by state and by program, but in many states we do administer food assistance and cash assistance programs, and of course CCDF. We serve as Head Start agencies, we contribute to Head Start agencies, we support WIC, the child welfare system, and just in general invest in core policies and services that align and strengthen prenatal to 3 systems, because we know that child development matters and that it strengthens county systems and economies to invest early. So as Cynthia mentioned, there was a lot of dedicated funding in various COVID relief plans to support childcare directly, but the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which passed in March, is really historic and notable for county governments in particular because of something it authorized called the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. This fund includes billions of dollars that are going directly to states, to counties, and to municipalities to help us respond to the COVID pandemic. And for counties alone, there are $65.1 billion that can be used on a variety of flexible COVID-related expenses. In New Jersey, all of the counties receive roughly $1.83 billion. That is divided amongst the counties by a population-based metric. And if you click on this little photo here in my slides, when they're sent out, you'll be able to go to the map that shows county by county allocations. We've got a whole resource hub on these dollars and where they went. So how can counties use these dollars to support child care and early childhood systems? Well, the broad flexibility of these dollars includes the ability to spend them to address negative economic impacts associated with the pandemic. The Department of Treasury is responsible for administering these funds, and they have created guidelines that are really flexible, and they are automatically allowing counties and states to spend these dollars as long as they are helping workers and families respond to the pandemic, for instance, by cash grants, that as long as they're helping small businesses in impacted industries, and as well as just using it to rehire staff and deal with public sector services that local governments take care of. So what that means in terms of the ability of a county just to directly support these programs is that when it comes to negative economic impacts, counties can and are giving grants to child care providers to help them retain and attract employees. So for instance, this is something they're doing in Jefferson County, Montana. They're supporting licensed child care providers and sustaining existing facilities and supporting new programs through the county based on this negative economic impact flexibility. Some counties can and are provide child care assistance directly to parents. For instance, vouchers to family members who need childcare while they are looking for work. That's something they're doing in Snohomish County, Washington. And counties can also leverage premium pay and workforce development flexibilities to support the child care workforce. You know, as Cynthia was mentioning, the child care workforce is really underpaid, and that's a huge barrier to supply. Lewis County, New York, for example, is working with the Lewis County Child Care Development Initiative to explore funding a program to train people to open regulated home-based childcare. San Diego County, California, is investing $16 million in childcare, including funding a pilot program in partnership with universities, community colleges, workforce development boards, school districts, and child care providers to provide job training for new early educators joining the field. So it's a really exciting development to see counties investing in workforce, investing in scholarships and vouchers directly to families with these funds. There's also an entire category of flexible, allowable spending under services for disproportionately impacted communities. And I'll get into that definition in just a moment. But Treasury has basically said, if you can prove that a community was disproportionately harmed by the pandemic across a variety of metrics, you can go even further than these economic impact allowabilities. You can invest to address health disparities. You can invest in housing and neighborhoods. You can invest in educational disparities, and you can work to promote healthy childhood environments. And basically, you know, it's fairly simple to do that. They've defined disproportionate impact really automatically if you are doing this work in a qualified census tract. The definition is on the slides, but that's generally just a given census tract that has a significant poverty rate or households, more than half of them earn less than 60% of the area median gross income. But there's other ways that you could suggest that a community or a neighborhood or even a block, a census block, has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And as long as you sort of identify one of those disproportionately impacted communities, you can go even further in the services that you use ARPA dollars to fund. So as an example, you can invest directly in new or expanded high-quality childcare programs, which is something they're doing in Oakland County, Michigan. They are offering $1.2 million to provide childcare scholarships to individuals and families in disproportionately impacted communities. You can also spend money on public benefits and services outreach, things like benefit navigators, or, perhaps if you have a child care resource and referral network center, I mean, that's a great example of something that you could fund with these dollars in a disproportionate impacted community. It's something they're doing in Stanislaus County, California. They're using $5 million to help residents connect to the variety of programs across the federal, state, and local spectrum that help them meet basic needs and support self-sufficiency. And that, of course, can include child care programs and child care subsidies. You can also provide home visiting services to new parents in disproportionately impacted communities, which they're doing in Travis County, Texas. They're actually going to be partnering with the United Way there to provide free home visiting to 2,000 families with newborns. And then you can also fund children's mental health services and programs. That's something they're doing in Lancaster County, Nebraska. They're spending $3.75 million of their allocation on family mental health projects. There are also ways that you can support childcare with these funds by giving grants to nonprofits that serve young children and families. You can provide direct assistance to families and households, just in the form of cash, which, we know when families have cash, they can use it to support childcare copays or pay a center. You can also convene and bring together experts to inform planning, which is a great idea, if you're in a county and you're trying to figure out where to invest to make impact. And you can also replace something called public sector revenue loss. And that basically means any service the county provides, they can potentially spend up to however much revenue they lost due to the pandemic to support those services. So if your county, provides Head Start or childcare or subsidizes wages already for those employees, you can use lost revenue to continue providing those services. So, I named a few examples of how counties are spending this money, and I know we're going to dig in even further, but just wanted to highlight that NACO does have a resource now where counties have their investment plans with their ARPA dollars uploaded into a database. We are updating this every day, and you can filter it out by category of spending, including human services. And it's a great way to figure out what other counties are doing. We have it broken down by population size, so you can get a sense too, based on the size of your county, how some folks are investing. And I will just flag again that we've got a coronavirus recovery hub that has a huge breakdown of the state and local fiscal recovery fund, analysis of the final rule, FAQs, and other guidance for county officials and community stakeholders as you think through how these dollars might support programs for kids and families. I have included my contact info as well as Arabella Pluta-Ehlers, who's a program manager here at NACO, and encourage you to reach out to us with any questions in the future. We're happy to chat further about this. And with that, I will kick it off to the next presenter.
I think I am next up. Everybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Katie Brooks. I'm the CEO of the Bend Chamber of Commerce. So that's in Oregon, for those of you who don't know where the heck that is. Central Oregon. I was asked to share a project that we did collaboratively here in our county called Deschutes County, and just kind of share an experience of what kind of a collaborative grassroots effort looked like and leading up to the ARPA funds and how we secured some ARPA funds to deal with the childcare shortage in our, we call it the childcare desert in Central Oregon. And I'm sure a lot of you folks over there on the East Coast experienced the exact same thing. It was bad before COVID. It was devastating afterwards. And so how does a Chamber of Commerce come to get involved in childcare? I've been in this job for about 5 years. And after the first year or so in this community, it was really clear as I was talking with employers that the child care shortage in our region was impacting the workforce. We're a little over 100,000 in Bend specifically. And we have, I think it's about 4 or 5% unemployment rate. When we started to really break down what the employment rate was prior to COVID, what we found is a lot of folks just weren't going to work because they couldn't find a place to take their child. So I took this on as a workforce issue and got the employers involved. This was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, funded what we called a child care accelerator, funded mostly by private sector money, but also used some public funding as well to go out and try and form a coalition and actually come up with some very specific programs to increase the number of slots for high quality environment here in Central Oregon. In the meantime, I was asked to serve on the state board for early learning, so I do that now as well. So here's where we're at now. After working on this for 3 or 4 years, COVID came, we had to down tools for a while, just like everybody else. But when the ARPA funds came, what we had was a plan in place that we had collectively been working on for quite a while. And it is essentially, I'm going to pull this up for you, a couple of things. It really took a look at how do we build an infrastructure, as we've been talking a lot about in this webinar, of getting the labor pipeline primed. So our minimum wage is going up to $15 an hour, but it's pretty tough to live in this part of the state. Housing costs are extremely expensive. Average cost of a home, I think, is around $650,000 to $700,000 and going up. So you can see the disparities happening. So what we really wanted to do is concentrate on building a sustainable workforce pipeline, figuring out what programming and what facilities we really need to get in place to increase the number of slots, and also just to provide that level of quality we were looking for. And then how do we sustain it as a business model? And that's the tricky part, because this is something that I think will last far beyond any funding from the federal government, not just ARPA, but the Build Back Better bill, which looks to have some limitations on long-term funding. But I'm just going to put it out there. It's my contention that the child care model is not feasible, and it has to have subsidization. The state of Oregon's governor, she's ending her 2nd term right now, put in place a couple of programs, Baby Promise and Preschool Promise, that provide a lot of funding for families that were having trouble making ends meet and paying for childcare. Even that program has its bookmarks. And so I just wanted to add that to the conversation. So we have several cities within our county. So you can see how many seats we were trying to add and how many educators we think that we needed. So this program did several things. It pulled together the higher education institutions. So much like what I think Rachel was talking about in San Diego, there are a couple of higher ed, community college and OSU Cascades, a state university, that got together. They'll be doing the programming. And the whole idea is, how do you have quality programming and then pull in the folks that are going through the community college certification program, and those who want to move up the food chain and go into teaching or psychology, or you name the field in early learning and human brain development. So how do we tap into that and make it a viable career path? So part of what we did was work with these institutions to figure out What does that look like? Embedded in both of their programs, the two institutions work really closely together. But then we went after some money. And the money came from several places. And one of them, of course, I'm going to share this with you. One of them, of course, is from ARPA funds, but we're also going for hopefully some longer term funding through the federal government, through the WorkSource program here, to do what's called we're calling it an apprenticeship, and it's going to be an official apprenticeship that actually pays people to go into the classrooms and augment this food chain here that you see. So we have a teacher's aide, we'll have an intern that helps the teacher's aide, that's paid for with ARPA funds, and also hopefully some long-term funding as well. Then we have a next level of a teacher. We're trying to get in at a level of pay that is sustainable. You can make a living off of it. Head teacher earns a little bit more, and then of course a director is a shared service across several programs throughout the region, so that you don't have to have a director for every single facility. So it'll be a shared model. And it'll also provide a pipeline for folks. So that's part of the formula here, is how do you fast track these folks into this career path and find some subsidization that pays them to be there. And if they can't afford to go to school, helps pay for their classes as they learn how to become a provider and a teacher and move through this as a viable career path. So we're using three different funds. One of them is the ARPA funds from Deschutes County. Also, BDAB is Bend Business Development. So the city of Bend is kicking in some money for the labor force. And also, as I mentioned, we're going to go for some longer term funding to make this go beyond the next 5 years or so. But we have a lot of slots that we want to fill. So in addition to this, we know that the programming needed to be funded, so the two institutions are developing that together. And then we partnered with folks around the region to look at existing facilities that were lacking in labor and how do we place these folks all throughout the region. And in addition to that, we need some facilities just to host the programming in and of itself on site. So we're building a mobile classroom that will house up to 100 children. It's basically a mobile home that's retrofitted, and we're putting the plans and specs together right now to be able to move anywhere in the region that we need it. And we're starting off at OSU Cascades, Oregon State University Cascades, and one of the local hospitals here to start this off with the idea that this is something that we can use over the next 20 or 30 years to move around as needed, while we're augmenting the in-home programs and the existing programs who are suffering from a severe labor shortage. So altogether, we secured about 7.7 million from our county alone. In addition to that, we got another $1 million from our state senator. It's a long story how he came across ARPA funds in our state during last legislative session. I will say that the state has been working on new legislation, new funding, new pathways for success for several sessions now. And all of these collaborative efforts kind of converged at the right time and the right place, so that we collectively were ready to ask for this money. We have this program thought out, in place, collected all of the partners across the region, and were able to put forward a collaborative proposal that eventually got approved through our county. County had $38 million total. We got almost 8 million of that just for child care through this collaborative effort. So that is my story, and I'm going to pass it on.
Great, thank you. So my name is Megan Stadler. I am with Jefferson Community College. I'm the Associate Vice President for Strategic Initiatives. And Kathy and myself, we are thrilled to be here today to share our model program. And Kathy, I'll let you kick us off.
So I am in fact Kathy Broder. I work at Community Action Planning Council, and we house the Child Care Resource and Referral Agency for for this 2-county area, Jefferson and Lewis counties. We are a very rural, there's a lovely map there. You can see we're closer to Canada than to Syracuse, but there is we're very rural. We have found that our diverse geographic population can't really diffuse geographic position, can't really support childcare centers, and family daycare homes seemed to be a better way to go. So back in March, the Lewis County Economic Development people said we need to do something about the childcare desert we're working with, where we've got, you know, a very few number of providers for a larger number of children. And they started looking at options, talked to Jefferson Community College about how we could make a change, how we could train people to have more childcare available for parents. Remember that in March, like everybody, we've been seeing childcare decline for years, but in March, people were starting, the vaccines were kicking in, people were starting to come back to work, and there just was not enough childcare to support people. So they were talking for a while. We talked with them. Community Action came on board, started talking about how we could do this and the best way to support family childcare as a faster, more cost-effective response to this. Small business development came in to talk about the fact that childcare providers don't necessarily go into childcare because they understand business, but because they love children and they want to care for children and they want to support children and families. We found that business knowledge and business education, it was lacking for a lot of our childcare programs. And then after we kind of put things together, Jefferson County, which has a little bit more population, is a little bit bigger, said, wait a minute, don't do something without us. We want to contribute too. And so that is how we got going and started building this case. The pandemic, the timing of it was amazing.
So we got together with our partners to develop this training program to help expand in-home childcare providers in our area. And we really designed the program with 3 objectives in mind. Number one, we wanted to quickly expand the number of slots available, but we also wanted to ensure that we were promoting high quality early childhood education, and at the same time supporting these new small businesses. As Kathy mentioned, folks went into this industry because they love children, not necessarily because they wanted to be an entrepreneur or had those skill sets already. So in designing the program, we wanted to cover each of those elements to ensure quality care and sustainable businesses. So as the communities college at Jefferson, we see education and workforce development as a key component to the overall economic health of our service area. And so it was only natural that we would step up to help coordinate this project and serve what was really an immediate workforce need. And so what we did is, number one, we handled the marketing and recruitment. We led that effort because we do have a marketing staff here at the college, as our partners did not, so it made all the sense in the world. We also hosted a faculty-led workshop on creating their first parent and family handbook, the draft of that, and then to incentivize participation, to help bring people into the program. We offered the opportunity to participate in our Introduction to Early Childhood Education course. So this was 3 credits that we were able to offer at no cost. And not only did that incentivize participation, it also helped us address one of our goals, which was to ensure we were supporting high quality care in our community. Then with the funding support that we had, we were able to make the strategic investment to bring a part-time mentor on board. This individual provided that one-on-one advice to the participants who were seeking to open up their own businesses. Each participant had their own individual hurdles to overcome, their own business questions, their own questions about how to set up, their particular facility. And so having that one-on-one mentor to coach them through the process was absolutely key to the success of the program. And then finally, we also set up a closed Facebook group. So that allowed our participants to form the sense of community with their peers, to hear how other people were doing, to be supported and move throughout what can be for some a difficult process of becoming regulated in New York State.
So then our part as a child care resource and referral, we helped with the recruitment. Megan undersold, just by the way, undersold the effect of the marketing from a non-child care advocate to get this program going. It needs to come from somebody that is not normally a child care advocate. We provided the first aid and CPR training that child care providers need. We provided the health and safety training that's mandatory to become registered or licensed in New York State. The application support through our registration. We also, the counties funded a child care stipend so that participants in this program, in this boot camp, could attend sessions without having to pay for, figure out their own child care payments. We had a supplies incentive. If you submit your application by September 1st, we will help you buy supplies. We'll give you an incentive to buy supplies. And then, because timing is everything, we had a large center that was relocating and they didn't want their old furniture. And they said, hey, do you know anybody that can use this? And so we were able to make what is very expensive, high quality daycare center furniture available to family daycare homes to come and pick out what they wanted and help them set up their space and make things work. All of the timing was just, it was interesting and good, as if childcare was kind of discovered during the pandemic.
And so the final component is our Small Business Development Center. So the college hosts an SBDC, and they were quick to jump on board and offer a series of workshops, really targeting those key skills that we knew childcare providers would need in order to be successful business owners. So they hosted online workshops, they brought in guest speakers, and then they provided that one-on-one advisor, which they would do for anyone in the community. So it was really just a matter of connecting those existing supports with these new aspiring entrepreneurs. And in those one-on-one conversations, they could talk about things like, how do I set rates? How do I prepare for tax season? And so that was a really key element to getting these new businesses off the ground. So none of this would have been possible without the support of our local counties and really without their bold action. So as Kathy mentioned, Lewis County brought all of the stakeholders to the table. They convened that first conversation and really said, we need to solve this problem. It is a major barrier to full employment in our county. What can we do and how can we support you? And so they stepped up, and Jefferson County was the next step there with them in securing initial pilot funding. And this funding, the partners, us alone, we would not have been able to have launched this without that initial seed funding. Thankfully, the pilot is working, and Kathy's going to share some of our initial successes. But based on that, the county said we need to absolutely continue this, and we were able to secure ARPA funding for the second cohort. So we are excited in January that we will be recruiting more individuals to start their own childcare business, and we hope to serve 30 and significantly, quickly, cheaply expand childcare in our rural community.
So just to give you an idea, yes, we started with lawn signs because, as I mentioned, it's very rural, so everybody is driving to work. So we held orientation sessions that were attended by 20 people, and we hope to open 8 to 9 new childcare, family childcare homes by January. Remember I said we started talking about this last March. So in less than a year, 8 to 9, if we got 8 childcare providers, we're talking 64 childcare slots. If we were looking at to build a small center, we probably would not have broken ground yet. So this is a big thing. In the first the last 3 years, 2018 through 2020, we had 10 new childcare programs. This year alone, we've had, we're looking at 8 for this year, 9 for this year. We've already opened 2 programs in, 4 programs in Jefferson County. We've got 2 on the cusp in Lewis County. So we expect this to continue to grow and more people for the next cohort. Thank you. Thanks, Megan.
Okay, so thank you again to each of our panelists for taking the time to speak about the opportunity that both counties and municipalities can have by investing their ARPA funding in services for young children and their families. So now we're going to take questions from our participants and ask all of our panelists to come back on and unmute and come back on camera. If participants could please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can enter questions for our panelists and then we will direct them to those questions. I think we already had one. And yes, you can access this recording. Should have said that to begin with. The recording, as well as the list of resources that we're going to briefly go over at the end of the webinar, will be sent to all participants and will be live on ACNJ's website to access. So that you should get that within the next few days. But since there aren't any other questions, I believe, in here, I'm going to just read the one that was already answered for our participants' sake. It says, are there ARPA funds for capital expenses to increase the number of center-based slots? And both Rachel and Katie, you answered this question, but would you mind just taking 1 or 2 minutes to review that question? Because I think it's a good one.
Sure, I'm happy to begin. So, it's a common question. We obviously have crumbling childcare infrastructure, much like the rest of our infrastructure in this nation. And we know that there are really dedicated efforts to honestly get dedicated funding for facilities, construction, and improvements, even in the upcoming reconciliation bill. So we've heard from a lot of counties about whether funding can support facilities, construction, and improvement. Our answer is sort of maybe, and I think Katie's example is a good example of where that can work. As I mentioned earlier, the disproportionate impact community does have explicit language allowing services that expand high quality childcare. I think there's also language in the interim final rule for the state and local fiscal recovery funds that allows COVID safety to be prioritized. So, if you needed to expand a center to, increase spacing between kids and potentially, upgrade your HVAC or whatever the case may be, those are the kinds of things we could see this money supporting. We are wary of encouraging brand new construction because Treasury has been a little quiet on whether or not that's acceptable. It's also so expensive that it's unlikely that many counties could maybe, build a new child care center with these dollars anyways, unless they're a large urban county. But I think Katie's example is a good one of where you could maybe sort of have that delicate balance. I will flag that the stabilization grants can support rent and facilities improvements and maintenance, and CCDBG generally does not permit spending on capital expenses, and that additional funding is still governed by the CCDBG rules.
Right. Okay, great. Katie, were you going to add?
Sorry, I just add, so Rachel, you did a great job of explaining that, because we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make this work. And it wasn't easy, but we threaded the needle. But I just encourage all of you in the state of Oregon, as I sit on the state Early Learning Council, it's been a source of great frustration, because we all know the economics don't work again, and that one of the pillars, one of the most costly aspects is your physical facility, and to have assistance in that to help balance that the books out enough so you can pay your people well enough to stay. Something's got to give. And so I encourage all of you to let your congressional representatives know how important it is to have flexibility in spending those monies when they do come through, because it really helps.
Right. Great. And I'm just going to ask, let everyone know, we're probably going to go a few minutes over the hour just so that we can answer these questions and then share some resources with you. So if you can just hang on with us, that would be great. If you have to get off, you will also receive the recording. So the next question that I believe was in the chat and was from Charles. For Katie, is the mobile classroom for childcare capacity as well as a training site? I don't know if I'm reading that.
Yeah, Charles, you nailed it. That's exactly what it is. And it's basically a child care lab. So it serves for the apprentice program and also for child care, both at the same. It's also an experiment, or it's a bad word. It's a place to implement the new program and the early brain development programming that they're running through the higher education institutions. So it does that dual purpose thing of training folks and also just making sure that we're developing a program that's in alignment with state-of-the-art, state-of-the-industry thoughts on early learning and early human brain development. So it's both.
Great, thank you. And the next question is for Kathy and Megan from Grace. She mentions this is an amazing project, but how did you get the localities to decide on your project versus the other uses of the coronavirus recovery money? And is there any lessons learned with that?
Okay, I'll jump, and Megan, you can tell me what I've gotten wrong. Honestly, it has to do with the advocacy that we got from our economic development people in the counties, that they looked at this and said, wow, this is a way that we can make an impact. We can make a fast impact. This is something that, you know, we're not gonna get into the nuts and bolts of all this kind of stuff, because Child Care Resource and Referral is there, small business is there, Jefferson Community College is there. We're going to run, you know, we're going to trust our partners on this. I would like to say that those relationships were developed over, you know, the last 6 months, and they weren't. It's been years building, but again, the timing had quite a bit to do with it.
Great.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is, you know, it was those relationships, it was those strong advocates, it was community-wide recognition of the childcare crisis. And our project was very inexpensive. So I don't think we needed a whole lot of convincing. You know, it's a relatively small amount for our counties to try out something innovative. And like I said, it worked out.
And last question, and this is again for Kathy and Megan. In Jefferson and Lewis counties, were the cohorts that went through the workshops already providing unregulated care before moving to regulated care?
Mostly we got brand new people, people maybe that had thought about it before or started it before, but people that were out of work and wanting to stay home with their own children, which several were in that group. Still wanting to run a business, have an income, but be home too. That there were a few that were doing, you know, now and then care and a little bit of drop in and a little bit of helping out. But New York State is pretty strict about the number of children you can care for unregulated.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to see if there's no more questions in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to Advocates for Children of New Jersey's Diane Delano, our policy analyst, to talk about considerations and next steps. And if our panelists could all go on camera, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to try to pull all of this together. And hold on one second. Let me make sure this works. Okay, I just again want to thank all these incredible panelists. I mean, what incredible information that you've been able to provide for us. And, you know, we're just very excited that you were able to be here and share your experiences with us. So again, this is an opportunity like we've never seen before. Historic amounts of money are made available to our state and to our counties and municipalities to really make a difference. And we really want to make sure that we are going to make the best use of these dollars. So to be successful, I think the message we've all been hearing is that we all got to really work together to really have it make an impact. And I'm not going to take credit for this. I heard this on a national call that I was on recently. It's kind of like the story of Stone Soup. And I think, you know, most of us are familiar with that folk story where some hungry strangers came to town, and the strangers basically convinced all the people in the village to help contribute to make a meal. Everyone was hungry. They were holding on to their resources as close as possible. But with a little bit of expertise, you were able to talk everybody into sharing and bringing ingredients that they had for the soup. And together they made the best soup possible. And that's kind of like what we really want to do here. We want everybody. So let's say the state is providing the broth. The broth is good, but if you have more ingredients, you can make a really rich stew that could really help to feed and satisfy everybody. And the kinds of things that you can bring to this stew isn't necessarily just limited to finances and monies. It's our expertise, it's our ideas, our talents that all have to come together to really make this work. Okay, so next steps and considerations. Again, you heard that this is all a collaboration. This is everybody pulling together. And it's going to look different in every county, in every community. Because these dollars have to be tailored to what the needs are that you're experiencing in your own areas, in your own communities. So you need to be the ones that are pulling the right people together to that table. So the table might look different across the state in different communities. But just for starters, we're throwing out some recommendations of different people that might come to this table to really help to make a difference. We're calling on county commissioners and mayors. They're the ones that know of the resources that are available there and can really help to convene these types of meetings. County colleges and four-year universities and colleges in these communities. You heard two great stories of how you know, the universities and colleges and community colleges all came together to help make a difference. The Chamber of Commerce, definitely a key partner, and other business advocates in the community. Your legislators, any of your elected officials, the public schools, they have resources. Not only the high schools, the VOTECs, all of them have resources that could come together to help make a difference with this. Service providers. You heard two stories about childcare specifically, but other service providers also have needs. And we also heard that home visiting was funded, mental health needs were funded, family support services can be funded. So we need to hear from the family success centers that have been dealing with these families throughout the pandemic, the home visiting programs, who may have had and have had a lot of impacts from the pandemic, possibly losing staff and really needing to have some additional resources to help continue to provide these vital services to families welcoming new babies into their home. Childcare centers, family childcare homes, they have great information, great data, great supports, and the childcare resource and referral agencies. Workforce initiatives and foundations, they have additional resources that can help pull all of this together and help really make a difference in your communities. As well as one of the most important voices, parents. You need to make sure that your parents are brought into the conversation. They could share their stories, which are really critical to help making a difference. Things that you need to consider is data. You need to know what is going on in your community. You need to know what the needs are. You need to know what childcare looks like. Childcare for specific segments of the population. Are you having issues with infant toddler care, preschool, transportation, whatever your issues and concerns are, you need to get that data pulled together, and you need to do it pretty quickly. ACNJ has a list of recommendations in almost in a wide number of areas. I think we have childcare recommendations for use of local ARPA funds, mental health recommendations, home visiting recommendations, and family support recommendations for how these dollars can really be utilized to make a difference. We have a great resource kit that we've been pulling together, and we'll keep adding as we hear resources that Danny's going to talk about in a few minutes. And we want to encourage you all to reach out to ACNJ. We're small but mighty. We might not be able to be there present for every single meeting and every single thing, but we can certainly attach you, guide you to the right people to talk to, and to try to support you in any way possible. We truly want these dollars to make a difference out there for children and families. So I'm going to turn it over to Danny to wrap us up.
Okay, so I am going, Diane, if you could stop sharing, that I can share the website with everyone. For today's webinar and for your future use, as Diane mentioned, we have a list of resources that we have collected from organizations that you've heard today, as well from others. I put the website in the chat. There are websites, blogs, and I'm going to bring it up too so that you can just see it. As well as booklets and other toolkits. And I'm not going to go through all the resources listed, but rather bring your attention to a few links. So the first being the Build Initiative Supporting Prenatal to 3 with Federal Child Care with federal funds. This document is great because it provides profiles on each of the federal relief funding streams, the total amount of funding, the timeline for spending, as well as policy guidance and some specific prenatal to 3 strategies. So it's a good place to start. Then also we have listed the National Association for Counties, as you can see, and they have, in partnership with the National Collaborative for Infants and Toddlers, they've created a learning community called Counties for Kids, where leaders can share questions and best practices and virtually learn from each other. So I highly recommend that as well. In addition, and you probably are asking, okay, where is this money and how much is everyone getting? So under the National Association for Counties, you'll see there is a link to get that list of funding, as well as under the National League of Cities. So you'll find the local allocations for both for the cities and municipalities under National League of Cities, and the link for the counties under the counties piece as well. But like, as you can see, there is so many additional resources. But last, but certainly not least, we had mentioned in the beginning, and Diane just mentioned, the importance of partnering with your community's local early childhood organizations. It's incredibly important to both understand the needs of families as well as the service providers in your communities, but also that these intermediary organizations, you can fund them to deliver these services. So on this page, you'll also find the state departments of children and families, as well as human services websites for childcare, as well as other services. So on the Department of Human Services website, childcare website, childcarenj.gov, you'll find what we mentioned earlier, a variety of resources, but specifically a link to the county childcare resource and referral agencies. You may not know, but there is a CCR&R agency in every county in New Jersey, and they worked with parents and childcare providers to provide information about financial assistance. They administer the family childcare program, and they provide training and technical assistance to childcare programs, as you heard from earlier from Kathy, who leads her CCR&R in upstate New York. And under the Department of Children and Families, there is a Family and Community Partnerships Community Directory, and this provides resources and links to that for programs that support families, including but not limited to, because it certainly is very comprehensive, the Family Success Centers, the Kinship Navigator programs, home visitation programs, county councils for young children in every county, as well as central intake. So those links are also on this website so that you can directly go there and see, if you don't already know, those community organizations that are so very important. So this concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for staying with us, even though we went over the hour by a little bit. With that, we want to thank each of you for participating in today's webinar, and to all of our incredible panelists. By participating, you have demonstrated that you are committed to identifying how to best utilize this funding to help young children and their families recover from this pandemic in your communities. And we look forward to partnering with all of you. As we mentioned, all participants will receive a link to this recording and a list to all the resources. It will all be on that page. So with that, have a great afternoon.